Good afternoon and welcome to this Construction Manager and BIM Plus webinar, a platform approach to construction in association with Procore Technologies. I'm your chair for today. I'm Will Mann, editor of Construction Manager magazine, and I'm very pleased to welcome today's speakers, Joseph Daniels, CEO of Project Utopia, Jamie Johnston, Director, Head of Global Systems at Bryden Wood, and Joe Whitaker, Sales Engineer at Procore. Today's webinar programme, the benefits of a platform approach, what the open approach means for innovation in the industry, how to remove friction on your projects, and having all your data in one place. A little bit of housekeeping. Please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask questions during presentations, and at the conclusion of the webinar, we'll have about 15 minutes to run through those questions with the panel. Okay, so I'm pleased to welcome our first speaker. That is Jamie Johnston, Director and Head of Global Systems at Bryden Wood. So I'll hand over to Jamie now. Please take it away, Jamie.
Okay, let's just share my screen. Can you hear me all right? Another slide's coming up.
I can, Jamie, that's fine.
Okay, I'm assuming that's right. I will apologise in advance because my internet's been dropping out all day, so hopefully it will hold up for long enough. Yeah, so I'm going to give a sort of industry overview, I guess, and highlight sort of some of the big trends that we're seeing or emerging in this sort of platforms space. So for those who haven't come across Bryden Wood previously, we've been going for 25 years now. We're an integrated consultancy, and we were set up specifically really to look at what a manufacturing-led construction sector would look like. So how do we get all of the benefits of safety, productivity, speed, quality, et cetera, that have happened in other sectors into construction, which, as everyone knows, sort of famously hasn't changed fundamentally for a long time. So for the last couple of years, we've started trying to generalize that approach. So the term platforms came out of a conversation with the Manufacturing Technology Centre, with Infrastructure Projects Authority and central government around, it was a term we deliberately appropriated from manufacturing. So automotive uses this term quite a lot. It's the kind of common kit of parts. So we started saying, well, actually, what are all the things we've learnt from a couple of decades of doing this? What are the features that are common across multiple types of building? So if you ignored the kind of sector boundaries that people put in place, what are the kind of common threads that you could start to pull together that would then reveal a potential kit of parts, common kit of parts that you could use to deliver lots of different assets across lots of different sectors, which would get you into the sort of repeatability that manufacturing likes, that would get you into the sorts of numbers that manufacturing likes, and therefore you can unlock all those benefits. Actually, everyone's already familiar with this concept. So IKEA obviously weren't the first people to do flat pack, but they've certainly scaled up that market. Almost everyone, I think, has probably put together some IKEA furniture, and you've probably noticed that there's some common connections which are the same things you use, whether it's a bed or a wardrobe or a chest of drawers or a bookshelf. So there's a whole lot of intelligence goes into those individual connections and ways of putting things together, which unlocks the ability to then make lots of different bits of furniture. You've also noticed that it's logistically very efficient, so you can get an entire bedroom's worth of furniture into your back of your car, and it's democratized or diversified the pool of furniture manufacturers because everyone's put together one of these things. So by standardizing components, they've unlocked a whole load of benefits, and we're trying to do the same thing for construction. So we started this conversation, say, with the IPA a few years ago, and saying, well, if you plotted everything that government buys on this graph, everything you buy lives there somewhere in terms of spans and floor-to-floor heights and things. There's certain kind of truths about certain building types. So floor-to-floor heights are a person height plus some headroom plus a zone for structure, and finishes and pipe work and duct work and things. So actually that kind of floor to floor height is nothing to do with sector, and it's all to do with people. And at that sort of floor to floor height, there's a natural depth of about 8 meters. You can get natural daylight into a building. So that's why lots of buildings have an 8 meter span corridor, 8 meter span. So apartment buildings, schools, hospitals. So we started saying if you plotted buildings like that, you could imagine a IKEA kit of parts that would do you small scale or cellular accommodation, repeatable accommodation buildings for MOJ, for Ministry of Justice, for single living accommodation for the army, for student accommodation, a kind of mid-span general purpose kit of parts, which we call Platform 2, and a big empty shed kit of parts, and you'd be done. So with a relatively small number of components, you could build big chunks of the government estate. So that started this conversation around, well, let's do that exercise for real, and let's start to define what those kits of parts look like. So this is the first prototype we did for the Ministry of Justice. So bottom middle, what you're seeing is the Platform 2 superstructure. So the end result isn't weird. So we're using concrete for the slabs because it's good for fire and acoustics, and at a price point, there's not much that can touch it. We'll talk about the sustainability bits in a bit. We use steel for the columns because it's small in section size, it disappears into the walls. But what we've tried to do is compress all of the intelligence into the connectors, just like IKEA. So if you buy a fabricated steel frame, it's about £2,500 a tonne. The raw cost of the steel is about £800 a tonne. And all of the extra cost is the transportation, the handling, the fabrication, the assembly on site. It's all of the kind of other bits that are not to do with material. What we do is literally buy raw steel, have one hole, cut or laser cut or punched into it. Turns up to site like your IKEA kit, spanning elements called ComFloor turn up to site, and then those brackets turn up to site. So we're buying commodity materials from big steel manufacturers, concrete from agri industry. So our supply chain is sort of big commodity people, and then the brackets are made by very small, very local SMEs who couldn't do a steel frame but can do laser cutting. So it makes our supply chain quite broad and diverse. And then on site, it's IKEA style. It's deliberately color coded. So the color tells you what type of connection it is. We only ever need those brackets. So regardless of the scale of project, whether it's Heathrow or a primary school, we just need those brackets, which means we can make lots and lots of those brackets, which starts to get us into that sort of economies of scale place. So this comes in, it's about half price compared to traditional construction for virtually the same material, same performance, no unusual supply chains, no unusual methodologies. So we're just removing all the kind of non-value adding activity and trying to get as close to sort of raw material cost as we possibly can. What that means, of course, is once you have that scale of repeatability, you can put a load of effort into absolutely nailing and optimizing every single component. So if you're going to make 1 million of something, every gram you take out, every manufacturing process, assembly process has a massive multiplier. So on the left, you can see a lean flat slab. This is for a residential scheme, traditional concrete solution. On the right is Platform 2. So you'll notice things like, because we have these sort of small steel columns, they're much smaller than the concrete equivalent, which means they affect your net to gross less, they affect your layouts less, they disappear into the wall, so it gives you kind of more flexibility. We're able to optimize the thickness of the slab. So you can see we've got an awful lot less steel and an awful lot less concrete. So, tick in the box straight away, there's just less material. And we're now working with the likes of agri industries on what is the lowest embodied carbon concrete we can use, so the carbon content will collapse. We're talking to steel manufacturers about only using steel which is made by electric arc furnaces powered by hydrogen fuel cells. So we think this will become one of the lowest carbon forms of construction, certainly competitive with CLT and things, which will be incredibly useful, because given that's the very, very high on everyone's agenda at the moment. This is market returns. We've had tender returns from steel specialists and concrete specialists. They're both saying we can assemble this, and they're both saying it's about twice as quick. And then you can imagine once you've got the superstructure, very, very quick and accurate, the facade clips into place, the MEP clips into place. So the superstructure goes up quickly, the following trades start quickly, and the overall program starts to massively compress. We've also been, again, IKEA style. Once you get down to that kind of level of repeatability, you can start to optimize the manufacturing processes. So we worked with the Ministry of Justice on developing their version of platforms, the first sort of iteration of it, to a level that prison industries could make the components. So this is a live facility. On the bottom right, you can see a completed, fully fitted out superstructure facade, interior fit out, MEP, everything was manufactured and assembled by prisoners. The idea being that if you could use the building of the prison estate to upskill serving inmates, forget the cost of, cost reduction you get in the construction, you could actually create new jobs, new opportunities. You would potentially rehabilitate prisoners who are then less likely to reoffend, so societal impact is large. And the point was that if one of construction's big problems is skills gap, if suddenly your pool of resource included non-construction people, so ex-services, ex-prisoners, unemployed, skills gap disappears, you create new jobs, new manufacturing, and then that has a potentially massive benefit, which is one of the reasons government's very interested in this approach. The other thing that government recognised was on the top there is the sort of procurement. For any major department, they buy loads of schools, no schools, loads of schools, or prisons, or whatever it is. I think people have recognised that if you were buying the same components across multiple programs of work, then you'd start to kind of build up a steady state base load of pipeline of need for these components, which would get you into the space where then manufacturers could invest, meet you halfway, and suddenly again you start to get that certainty of pipeline, which is one of the big problems that people foresee in other forms of modern methods of construction. So we start to get to a place where we're just buying these things consistently. The other thing, of course, it does is once you get into those scales, then you can start to deploy robotics. It's not worth doing unless you have a very, very fixed product and a potentially quite large pipeline. So we're already working with robotics manufacturers on is appropriate to make the individual components. So we don't think and proper manufacturing, and I think we're going to see more and more of that sort of stuff in the future. The other thing we've been investigating, this is our prototyping centre. This is a larger span platform, but the principles are exactly the same. This is for Landsec. This is about 9 by 9 metre grids. We've been looking at what level of automation is appropriate on site. So as I say, it's not big robotics. All of the kit that you're seeing here is stuff that they use in distribution sheds all the time. What you're seeing here is the shuttering getting lifted into position. So the principle was to build the entire slab from the slab below. So we're pumping the concrete. It's self-compacting concrete. We have a little robot that levels it on the top, which is fairly sort of straightforward stuff. But the idea is that once that slab's gone off, you then lift the kit onto the next slab and then you build it up. So what we're demonstrating is that with 4, maybe 5 people, you could build yourself a 10-story office with tiny number of people, little bit of automation. You'll see in the second, we've also got all the MEP fixing points already in place. So then the MEP kit clips into position and off you go. So we think there's a opportunity to start to deploy automation at this sort of level. And I mean, we were doing this anyway, but you can imagine a post-COVID world where we're looking at how to have this sort of stuff is going to start to become very, very interesting. It's 2 9-story office buildings, so not the biggest thing that Landsec have built, but of a scale that it's kind of proves a lot of points. Architecturally, it's not been compromised by the fact we're using platforms. You can see there, Will Mann has actually written a fantastic article on it, so by all means have a look at that afterwards. It's got some of the background to that. These are the statistics that Landsec are showing at the moment. So more net lettable for lower cost, which if you're a Landsec, that's a very good equation. Less embodied carbon, less material waste, quicker, and significantly fewer people. So this is project 1. You can imagine the plan is for these figures to get better and better over time as we start to develop more and more of these things. As I mentioned a couple of times, government has been picking this up. So we started this conversation back in 2017. It's been informative, or it's informed the budget statement. It's informed things like the Construction Innovation Hub. So you might have seen that IPA published this document back in 2018, saying this is our what we meant by the autumn statement, that we're going to start using these components across multiple sectors, have them manufactured, use this platform approach. This was a slide, one of Keith Waller's slides from the Construction Innovation Hub, saying this is the kind of 10-year vision from, you know, the proportion of stuff which is traditional will diminish significantly, and a lot more things will be delivered using platforms. You might have seen this got put out on the Hub website. I'm actually the design lead for the Construction Innovation Hub as well, so we're making all of the stuff that we've learnt across the government departments and the stuff for Landsec available through the Hub. So we're now inviting industry to join this sort of movement and start to scale this stuff up. But again, you can see the messaging is quite clear. This is the longer term plan. Last thing I'm going to talk about is the other thing it unlocks, and this is the kind of touch point with the stuff we'll talk about later, is you can imagine once you've got your platform components, they're then quite rules based. So you can then start to use that rules based to automate the design process, and not just make it the same design but quicker, but actually make it a better quality design. So you might have seen we've been publishing open source apps over the last year or so. Not going to go through all of these, but we put one out for housing for the Mayor of London. This was to speed up the early design process for housing, but also embed within that design sort of manufacturing logic for a number of systems. And we've now got a workflow. We actually showcased this at Future Build, which seems like a long time ago now, back in February, but we've now got a workflow where we can take a design developed in Prism, which is what you're seeing on the screen here. From that, we can extract the data. We can then generate a kind of data file of that building, which we can put into simulation software. So we can then run a whole load of different simulations on vertical sky component and overlooking and pedestrian movement, etc., etc. So we can use that speed to generate a design, do lots of simulation and testing around that design, get hopefully a better quality design, or kind of better considered design. And once we've got a thing we're happy with, we then say and create the BIM model. We have a workflow that goes and gets the relevant platform components, generates you a LOD 400, bill of materials quality, completely coordinated BIM model, and the whole thing takes 20 minutes. So we would never do it in 20 minutes. We'd actually use that speed to test more and more ideas. But you can see once you get into this kind of approach, it starts to unlock a load of benefits, not only in the physical world, but also in the digital world. And that's the kind of thing we're really interested in, is those sort of touch points. So that's just about in time. So I will leave it there and hand over. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you also for mentioning the Sumner Street article. Okay, so we're now going to move on to our next presenter, which is Joseph Daniels, CEO of Project Utopia. So I'm going to hand over to Joseph now. Please take it away, Joseph.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to say a quick hello. I didn't. It would try and let me start video, but allow me to. So I'm Joseph Daniels, CEO and founder of Project Utopia. And today what I'm going to be sharing with you is a baseline around what Utopia does, but more importantly, how we have applied global digital technologies with the likes of BREEAM, with the likes of some of the states in America, and with government here in the UK, to effectively utilize all of the world power resources that digitally exist online and apply them to a variant of technologies to build better homes for the future. So if you bear with me, I'm just sharing screen now, and unfortunately we've got it in PDF due to the fact that I was customizing this to fit in more of the Procore angle as we speak. I want to make sure that we really cover what Procore achieves and its objectives. So Project Utopia, it stands for Economic and Environmental Utopia. We develop core energy, construction and intelligent technologies, and we focus on 4 key criteria that fit within the economic and environmental procedure. On the environmental side, we ensure we're looking at sustainability as a core for manufacturing. This is circular economy, the ability to reuse recycled materials, and ensuring that our homes are always net zero, but in most cases carbon positive. Our average home is 103 out of 100 on the EPC rating. And then what we had is social acceptability, the ability to customize, the ability for anywhere you go in the world when we did work in Africa, Asia, America, and Europe, to be able to create these resource points, these homes, these schools, these buildings, but be able to make sure that they can be cladded in any way, they can be shaped in any way, they can be styled in any way, with minimal impact changes through the manufacturing supply chain. And then, of course, we look at the economics. One of the goals and objectives we had to ensure were all the technologies were scalable to a point where we could globally distribute them. We're able to set up a micro facility in less than 6 weeks in any location in the world. And in 6 months, we're able to set up a semi-autonomous line that will produce up to 2,000 units and can be scaled there accordingly. And then, of course, affordability. The system and its component parts work kind of like an iPhone. We combine different core technologies that we've innovated and partnered with that allow us to select technologies that once put together can be quickly assembled using local skilled labor. What that means is we were able to build a 63 square meter 2-bedroom apartment in Namibia. We provided the superstructure in less than 3 hours, and it was a beyond passive 10 times air tightness part L part P for building performance, as well as having smart home technology and being energy positive. All of that whilst maintaining affordability, which can be seen in the African marketplace. So as I've mentioned, scalability, affordability, the adoptability and sustainability are at the core of the business. And how does that look? Well, what we have a hyperstructural panelization technology. We then combine that with solar slate, lithium and cadmium telluride energy technologies for energy generation, energy storage, and just as importantly, we now have partnered exclusively with Samsung globally for a specialist new air source heat pump that allows us to use heating, cooling, ventilation, and hot water. So all of these core technology can now be monitored, quantified, maintained, and discovered along a digital program. And then finally, we have our own IoT patented smart home technology. What this does is it allows sensors and all the electronics in the home to be compiled. So as you go through this process of building a super shell with energy positive outcomes and integrated smart technologies, every single process in this supply chain can be tracked. And through that, we deliver homes, apartments, and schools. So now coming on to what it actually is that we utilize Procore for and how this fits in a digital platform. Or bear with me 1 second. Yeah. So effectively, what we're looking at as an Utopia development, we've got all these typologies and we have all the different building variants you can build any shape and size. But what's important is to understand the development process and the supply chain. Of course, as you go through a development program, it's simple to say digital. We've developed digital tools for planning, but fundamentally there are requirements within the development and procurement and delivery supply chains that can't be negated around because of a number of factors such as frameworks, global partners, and effective delivery. So as we develop the developments ourselves and we deliver these projects, we look at our core fundamental key pieces of what exists within Utopia, and the way that no matter what site you look at, from beginning of design and the platform right through to delivery and post monitoring, how these are assessed. So effectively at the beginning, you're looking at site surveying, you're looking at drone deploying, you're then looking at the massing through to the design selection. Then you're incorporating some sort of VR or digital BIM twin that people can then look at. You then have to apply your technologies to construct and build these things, whether that's your IP, secondary technology, or supply chain products. Then you have to effectively containerize or assemble and deliver these points to site that exist within different frameworks around the country and around the world. These are then constructed. They are then effectively technologized through the supply chain. And then you have a post-site survey, snagging through Matterporting. And then of course, you have the marketing and the post-monitoring of the system. So no matter who the client is, no matter who you're going to, whether it's a consumer, whether it's a contractor, you're always going to be looking at these key points throughout the delivery of the supply chain. So what's really important is to understand what tools are used in the supply chain. One tool doesn't fit all. What Procore has the ability to do is something quite unique, where you can draw down different elements and it's kind of got an operating system style basis. What we're able to do as an organization is we are able to understand that all these different technologies we use at different elements of the supply chain point is inputted. Then, of course, going through the process, you're able to track through your design and your massing using Revit and BIM modeling. You're even able then to add elements of CGI if you're able to work with APIs to embed that, you know, realism in a gaming engine or in a CGI platform. Through then the construction process of technologies, you're able to embed NFC or QR coding, and each individual process is able to be tracked along this supply chain program before it gets to site. Once it's at site, you're able to use different digital tools to monitor your on-site delivery. That in some cases could be Struction Site. There's another number of different softwares that are used to really monitor that. And then, of course, once you've done the build, development, and delivery, you know, to look at pure digitization, which we're working on with BRIAM, is around, well, site surveys have to exist. So as much as you can get the kits of parts like we have, and we can deliver buildings that are energy positive, and we can construct a unit in 3 hours, and we can build a whole building in 2 weeks, fundamentally, the processes of RICS and the REBA design programs, all of these things have to be catered for, and they have to be quantified. Well, working on a digital platform will enable us to digitally assess these goals. And in COVID, that couldn't be more important. By understanding now that by using Matterport on site at different stages, we're able to understand snagging, understand issues and building control elements. But also right at the beginning, from the design point, we're able, by using Drone Deploy, to put a Revit BIM model directly onto the real site. It then gives us a higher level of accuracy that's never been achieved before. And by using operating systems such as Procore, it can make the delivery to the consumer or to the client immensely more efficient. Because not only are you able to digitize and track the whole process as a project manager or a delivery manager, what you're also able to do is provide client-facing information. And for us as an organization, what we've realized is it really breaks it down simply to be able to provide core assets that the actual requirements of planners and the requirements of building controllers and the requirements of client really need. So your client may be a council, a developer, a planner, or a housing association. But what they're able to do is, because you have a digital tracking process and you have a platform in which you can operate your whole manufacturing to delivery supply chain on, it allows you to simply upload these key elements into a software and then be front facing to the client with each of these components. So the overall message from us at Utopia delivering these next generational systems is that the ability to have an online platform is going to now take elements from the supply chain, right from planning through to construction, through to post-monitoring, occupation and consumer facing outputs in one formatted place that definitely allows us to take more control as we look to scale. Because without digital tools like this, we aren't going to be able to scale to meet the numbers required globally for the current housing deficit. Thank you very much. I'm Joseph Daniels.
Thank you, Joseph. That was excellent. I'm now going to pass you on to our third speaker. That is Joe Whittaker.
Perfect. Thank you. All right.
So if I can leave you to take it away and share your presentation.
Perfect. And Joseph, if you stop sharing your screen, then I'll be able to share mine. Not as exciting of a presentation. I just have a slide of my face, but there it is. All right. Yeah, so just kind of want to wrap this up from Procore's end. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very interesting stuff. I think a couple of things that are really interesting from those presentations, talking about the platform and how Joseph and Project Utopia are grabbing other technologies and able to plug those into one centralized platform, which is Procore. So Procore's goal is to connect everyone in construction on a global platform. Very audacious goal, something that we're going to be working on for years and years to come. So what that means is, you know, as a technology platform, we want to connect processes, we want to connect different technologies, and we want to connect people. So Joseph did a really good job kind of explaining the technology bit. He spoke about Matterport and how that information, they can use that solution there for part of their process, but then it plugs into Procore, the overall operating system, if you will, of those construction projects. And let's say 5-10 years down the road, there's a new tech startup. Before this, we were all talking about how it'd be cool if we had a map of all the different construction startups that happened in the last couple of years. and they're going to continue to happen in years to come. So Procore will allow you to future-proof your business by being able to plug and play those new solutions into our open platform. So one thing to think about is just the open marketplace that we have with things like Asset Power projects, Matterport, like we talked about, DocuSign, that are already pre-built, ready to go, but then also having an open API so that when new companies spin up or you build a custom app that you want to get that information in there, you can easily do so. The next thing I want to talk about is also just connecting all the people on the project, because you're gonna have a lot of different stakeholders on any project. Construction historically has been a prototype business. Obviously, looking to change that with the likes of these two companies, but a lot of things are changing on a very regular basis, and that's coming from a lot of different companies. So Procore has an unlimited user model, which extends that platform to start gathering information from things like subcontractors, manufacturers, clients, designers, with bespoke permission, so you can get the information that you need. People can use these tools in the way that they need to. And again, all coming into that centralized platform in a really easy to use way. So I come from construction. I know all this technology sounds a little bit overwhelming for some people that might be very used to Excel, but most site managers know how to use Facebook on their phone. If they're able to use Facebook, it's the same thing with Procore. They can pick up their phone, grab that information that they need, and it's coming into that central platform. So yeah, again, connecting all those people from site users with a mobile device all the way to designers that are highly fluent in BIM. Yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about here was the analytics on top of that. So all the information coming into one platform, having it in one central place is great. And one thing that Procore can do with that is start to look at trends and analyze that data. So you can start to see from other tools, from Procore's native tools, wherever it's coming from, whoever it's coming from on the project, you can start looking at trends across those projects. So one thing that I always like to think about is health and safety. If you had all the health and safety information around leading indicators, lagging indicators, and you could really drill into why people are getting hurt on site, you can start putting plans in place to make your job site safer. So yeah, that's kind of my wrap up there. So with that, I can pass it back to you.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Joe. We will shortly go on to Q&A. I'm just going to say a little bit about the on-demand function for this webinar. A few people have asked if it's going to be available at the end, and yes, we will make this webinar available for you to download once it is concluded. So we've had a few questions and I'm going to run through those now. First of all, we've got a question in relation to Jamie's presentation from Daniel Gomez, who asks, is the technology you showed proprietary, or can it be purchased and installed by a third party? And if so, what sort of training would they need? Thank you.
That's a good question, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have, it's not proprietary. We've never protected or patented any of the systems we've developed as a sort of principle that we want the industry to adopt this stuff more widely. So actually the stuff we developed for the MOJ, we've effectively open sourced to the government. So it's not something you can buy off the shelf at the moment. We're in the process of developing the supply chains for this, but it's partly what the Construction Innovation Hub is there to do, actually, is to answer that question. Take the stuff we've developed, complete it, work with the MTC and the likes of those guys to put in place all the kind of quality process to make this very, very scalable and very widely adoptable. So the long-term vision is that anyone can use this stuff, anyone can build like this. And I kind of showed those examples of the prisoners. The idea is that the training will be a bit like IKEA style manuals, that, you know, we'll have training courses teaching people how to do the tasks that we're developing. So yeah, we're trying to scale it up ourselves, but I suppose the sort of better answer is that's what the Construction Innovation Hub is there to do, is to help us make this stuff more widely available.
Okay, thank you for that, Jamie. There are a couple of others actually relating to your presentation. Paul Needham asks how the platform approach affects the building acoustically.
So I'm assuming this is to do with the slab thickness and the fact we have less concrete. So what you need for fire and acoustic separation, mass and vibration is about 160 mil of concrete. So robust details needs 2,400 kilometers per square meter. So what you really need to do everything is about 160 mil of concrete, but that doesn't span very far. Which is why we have a thin slab with the downstands. So the traditional solution to that is to make the slab a completely consistent thickness, because it's easier to do that because the shuttering is easy, and you make that thickness predicated on the long spans. So lots of flat slabs have a completely consistent slab of about 225, 250, 275 mil of concrete. And actually 30, 40, 50% of that is just wasted material. So we actually perform, you know, exactly as you need it to perform acoustically, but then we tune the material quantities around that performance, rather than flat slab, which just does a thing which is easy to build and wastes loads of material, so you actually get sort of diminishing returns. So the answer is it performs incredibly well acoustically, but using the appropriate amount of material. Hopefully that's answered the right question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jamie. A question to Joseph, which actually Joseph has given an answer to through Zoom, but I don't know if you want to expand a little bit on that, Joseph. The question is from an anonymous attendee: what is the maximum lifespan of the buildings built by Utopia?
Yeah, and I believe that the same potential question has come after 6 years. One has to demolish it and rebuild during the lifespan. What maintenance do you need to focus on? So, what our Utopian system consists of is a hyperstructural panel system. It can last beyond 100 years. You have to ask yourself the question: magnesium oxide board and concrete boards are used in projects that last the test of time for, you know, hundreds of years. If you look at the Great Wall of China, so from a structural perspective, we're warranted over 60, which is a typical requirement. When it comes to the facilitation of the MEP systems and electronics, we have self-monitoring. We're the first provider, we believe, that out of the MMT market that actually has self-censoring BIM building management technology that enables us with Samsung to basically monitor and predetermine any deficiencies or issues with the actual technological assets in the building. However, the lifespan of an LED is the lifespan of an LED. We cover a 7-year warranty as a baseline on all technology, but then it becomes a convention to the home or domestic user. Options for service package, but the principle of it is that the Utopia system has more self-monitoring, smart awareness that does give us longer term value on each individual technology used. But in comparison to construction industry, yeah, we have a whole life purpose solution.
That's great. Thank you very much, Joseph. One or two questions for Joe in relation to Procore. Joe, you've answered this question briefly. Is Procore a useful tool for reporting, agreeing variations, and carrying out interim valuations remotely? That is from an anonymous attendee. And you've answered that Procore Project Financials is built for this. Can you just explain a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So Procore, one of our products is called Project Financials, which is really focused on contract management, variation management, payment applications, as well as budgeting and forecasting. So it's really a job costing solution for construction companies, where you can manage your main contract with your client. You can manage all of your contracts with subcontractors and vendors. You can bring in internal costs that you could have, and have that information populate to your valuations, payment applications. And we also have integrations with these financial tools with some leading accounting solutions on the market.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Joe. Someone else has asked about how easy Procore is to use for site operatives, and I know it's one of the selling points with Procore through the smartphone app. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? How it's used at site level?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I can just say that it's easy to use, but some more context probably helps. So one thing that is kind of interesting is Procore had an iPhone app before the Apple Store was actually officially released. Our CEOs and founders believed that mobile technology was going to be cloud technology was going to be a really big thing. Back in 2002, it was kind of tough when there was no Wi-Fi on the job site, so it was a bad idea then. But then once the iPhone took off, once Androids took off, is when really Procore found its footing. We also employ about one user experience designer for every 4 engineers, which is really over-resourcing that. And we do that so that we make that end user experience really easy. The end outcome really is my old site manager was a guy named Dwayne. He came into work on a motorcycle, had a bunch of tattoos, and got most things done by yelling. Kind of your typical old site manager, not the most tech savvy person in the world, but he loved Procore because he could take his phone out, use talk to text, snap some photos, and move along with his day, doing what he loved the most, which was building.
Thank you, Joe. Another question we've had, which is actually to Joseph, but I think it's for both Joe and Joseph, and that question, which comes from Adebayo Fuawe: does Procore use 3D, 4D, 5D, and 7D models for project delivery?
From my perspective, we haven't achieved that yet, maybe because we use CGI-based gaming engine design to allow us to walk through in mixed reality, real and fake sites by combining with drone deploy. So as far as I'm aware, it's more about the inputs and data analysis, the feedback, than the actual modeling itself that is able to be viewed within Procore. But from my perspective, as I said, the reason that we originally went with Procore and, I went over to Sandvan and met a number of their team was because the open operating system, open platform basically makes it like its own construction app store. So inevitably, I believe that in time, you'll be able to achieve any of these goals if you have the right knowledge or the right product that you want to plug into it.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Yeah, you nailed it. We don't necessarily have native functionality within Procore, but we integrate with a number of solutions. We know that we're not going to be able to build everything in the future, so that's why we've played this the platform approach. So you can kind of plug and play the other additional tools that you need.
A question which probably can be answered by everyone on the panel, or everyone might like to have a crack at it. John Cornish, he asks, how do you overcome local building standards and codes in various countries?
I've got quite a big impact on this, actually, if you don't mind. I've built a unit in Namibia. We're currently working with a number of states in the US. I met with Prime Minister Modi in India, and I've met with Briam in China, and we're deploying across a number of European countries. How do you overcome local building standards and codes? The ability to be able to deliver consistently now through processes of construction should give you pre-approved typologies. Overcoming local building standards and codes in various countries, unfortunately, doesn't depend on a centralized solution, but hopefully platforms like this can make it simpler and easier to understand. I've had to have the same certificate with the same UCAS accredited protocols and the same technology signed and written in 6 to 7 different languages in 7 different ways, simply to provide the exact same outcome. So we're currently working with Briam on a centralized solution. And I think it's more about how does the platform simplify for local building standards and codes, the processes and inputs which go in, rather than actually the products themselves overcoming it. I think this is a simplification process that allows platforms to explain it in a simpler way.
Okay, does anyone else on the panel want to speak about that?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we deploy this stuff for companies like GlaxoSmithKline. They take us into all sorts of markets, so we deliver this stuff around the world. But yeah, we typically design to sort of Euro codes as a baseline, and then you work in the local context to work out what extra over, if any, bits you need to meet the codes, and you can tune the components to do that, so whether it's seismic or something else. So we're sort of fairly used to tuning them in that sense. What we have found actually is that there's benefits like the fact that there's less reliance on workmanship, which is enormously powerful in some of the markets that we work in, where you don't want to be reliant on skills or trades that don't necessarily exist. The fact that you get that kind of consistency, it's the same repeatability, actually makes it much easier when you engage with the statutory authorities, because the process is much more transparent. They can see exactly how the thing's deployed. They can understand much more about how the design's been developed. So we found it's not been tricky to do, actually.
Also on this topic, Darren White asks, do platform systems have BBA certificates?
No, because we don't really need them. So it's interesting. We were with a big Resi developer. We submitted the scheme that you saw, the one where we have the comparison thing, to NHBC, and they said, whatever, not interested. It doesn't trigger. So you can imagine we're using steel and concrete and bolted connections, and there's nothing in there actually which is considered to be like massively innovative. So some would say the volumetric solutions, you need to have a sort of BBA thing or BOPAS, or you need to go through some process, or the warranty people, insurance people won't touch it. Actually, again, we're getting the same feedback that people are going, right, so it's concrete. I sort of trust you can do that. There's less reliance on, you can imagine if you do a kind of traditional steel frame, every connection's been designed bespokely. You're relying on the person putting the right number of bolts with the right number of torque settings and things. So there's less chance of a kind of sort of inherent design flaw. You can do much better quality control of the components. So actually you could just call it traditional construction and not know how it was built. You'd go through the same building regs types approvals. So actually it doesn't trigger any kind of need for that sort of certification. The thing we are developing with the hub is the kind of quality assurance, manufacturing type quality assurance sorts of processes, which is again a good place for this to live. But again, that's much more like manufacturing than it is maybe a sort of traditional construction certification approval type process.
And Jamie, another question in relation to the Lancet case study from David Hugill, who asks if you can say a little bit more about the 9.5% saving in build costs.
Yeah, sure. So that was a combination of a load of factors. So firstly, there was less material in the first place. You can read Will's excellent article and you'll see there's, I think we've got 20% less embodied carbon. A lot of that came around through just having less material, so that's good. Fewer people on site and shorter program inherently means less welfare, etc. And some of the big gains were things like, because the superstructure was designed as a platform and was therefore very accurate, what we found was that when you go to the facade supply chain, a lot of the cost is the filling the gaps between their millimeter perfect, beautiful system and a traditional wobbly bit of concrete that sits behind it. So when we engaged the supply chain and said, here's how we're developing it, we can put all of your fixing points in, it'll be much more accurate. We found the facade cost was coming back like 30% cheaper. So some of it was less material, some of it was less people, some of it was better productivity, some of it was improved logistics, and big chunks of it were just that the tender returns, people were going, all right, so if my MEP is just going to clip into place, I'll do a deal on that. And so some of the individual packages were coming back significantly cheaper. So it wasn't actually the superstructure was a contributor to that, but it was more that it was an enabler of a bunch of other benefits that accrued after. I thought we should have been higher than 9.5% less actually, but next project we'll nail it.
Thank you, Jamie. A question, I think, for Joe on Procore. This comes from Andrew Robertson, who works in the north of Scotland, where he says the phone signal can be patchy at times. So he asks, can Procore work offline and sync later when back in mobile or Wi-Fi range? Yeah.
Great question. Not all construction sites have the best Wi-Fi connection, as we know. Yes, so we have very robust offline functionalities where you can sync down drawings, sync down models to a device. whether that's your phone or a tablet. You can work offline, create snag pins, RFIs, take photos, whatever information you're gathering out on site. And then once you get back to connectivity, that will all sync back up.
Okay, clears that one up. A very topical question comes from Alan Somerville, and this can go to the whole panel. How do you see this type of construction approach fitting into the post-COVID market?
So I'll have a go at that one. So, I mean, you can see from that video of the automated construction stuff, we were doing that to improve productivity mainly, but you can imagine that idea of having very few people because you've got a bit of automation is bound to be attractive. Also, because of the kind of standardized assembly processes, rather than allow people on site to kind of make up how they build a particular piece, we can actually rehearse the entire construction of the building. So because the building is a series of standard components and therefore standard assembly processes, you can actually analyze that, rehearse that, and tune the program to get the right number of people working at the right sort of distance, at the right sort of pace. So it allows us to do a lot more analysis and fine tuning. So we do that for people like Glaxo, where you have limited numbers of people working in fairly extreme environments, but actually the same principles will, it turns out, be incredibly powerful moving forward, I think. So yeah, that combination of a bit of automation, standardization, and the digital tools that it unlocks, I think are going to be part of the solution moving forwards.
Yeah, from my perspective, you know, whether it's the digital planning tools we're developing or the fact that you drone deploy a site now rather than having site surveys, and everything is transitioned through a cloud-based design program. From the design element, you're going to probably have, you know, as minimal human touch impact, which means that we can speed up. You know, for us, again, it was as has been said by Jamie, it's all about speed of delivery. You know, how do we make this more efficient to scale up? But ultimately, in a COVID market, that makes sense. On-site construction perspective, the ability to be able to track a lot of this using digital processes and in principle, you know, Matterporting, the different elements, you know, once you've done your construction, once you've done your engineering, means that you don't get site overlap. The ability to be able to do that and track it means that you get minimal site overlap. With us being able to construct, you know, at BRE, we did 110 square meter unit in 72 hours on site time with a team of 5 guys. We're now working on a process of putting 2 of our main panels together, which gives you a 2.1 clearance just on the panels and only having 2 guys on site, because we only need 2 or 3 guys really to assemble. So from a construction perspective, being able to digitally build and plan these things means that you can have preemptive understanding of what's required. And then by using digital programs in the construction supply chain, you can even implement, you know, COVID rules and restrictions for the safety of the construction workers far easier. And with that digital feedback through Procore and all that feedback analysis from, you know, visuals, whether it's video from construction site or from Matterport, you're able to keep a track of your site much more efficiently and therefore make sure those restrictions are in place. So for us, the digitization is going to be the enablement of us being able to work going forward to not put any of our staff at risk.
Joe, did you want to have a word on that question about COVID?
Yeah, COVID's definitely interesting for us. I think a lot of people are taking this opportunity to, sites are shutting down, things are potentially going a little bit slower right now actually on site, to take a look at their processes, their tech stacks, evaluate things, look at how they can work offline, or sorry, work online while working from home. A couple things that Procore did really quickly when we saw this was we immediately integrated with Zoom, Microsoft Teams, so that utilizing our meetings tool, you can launch directly into Zoom meetings like we are right now, or your Microsoft Teams account to help facilitate some of this. So that's just one of the kind of quick things that we did once this hit.
Thanks for that, Joe. Another question, anonymous question. How far down the construction supply chain can the platform approach be useful? Will we see smaller contractors adopting it, do you think?
I can jump in on that as well. We're already supporting smaller contract programs. One of the amazing things about this platform approach is that you can have different workforces and different types of suppliers plug in. You know, we principally set out and define what digital tools we require for the BIM modeling, for the construction process, and for the post-occupancy. What that means we're able to do is, by using this program, or using, online platforms in general, we're able to plug in contractors at different places, and provide them with our sets of tools. So our planning, we've got a tool called Project Gateway. It's a brand new state-of-the-art planning tool we've developed. We're able to literally supply that to our contractors. That then what happens is we provide them, a set of digital principles and say, hey guys, download and use this. And it's not as cost impactive as you think, but we can also accommodate for that for the small contractors. If they need to use a license, or if we need to support the license for the project, that's what we do. And that's the way that we at Utopia kind of feel that we're enabling the local contractor market more than the volumetric builders.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd say on the physical component side, I use the example of the platform 2 brackets, that we're buying things from much further down, much deeper into the supply chain than you might traditionally. So if you're buying a normal steel frame, you go to a big steel fabrication person, and they'll put your frame. We're actually delving right down into the installers and the assemblers. So our view is always, a lot of the inefficiency in construction is the kind of transactional cost. So Tier 1 divides the thing up into packages, passes that risk and package down through the supply chain, and there's a massive disconnect between where the value sits with the people actually doing the work and what the client wanted. There's a whole load of tiers in the way. So what we're enabling people to do is, procure at a much more granular level. And those are some of our challenges at the moment, is the kind of procurement bits. But Sumner Street, keep coming back to that one, is being delivered as a CM package. So rather than have a kind of traditional Tier 1, Landsec are actually procuring things much more themselves, and they've got a CM partner in the middle, sort of managing that. So yeah, it has an impact on the procurement, but it does allow us to be a lot more granular and reach further down the supply chain. So I think that's only going to be a positive thing moving forwards.
Okay, we're nearly out of time. One or two people have asked questions about skills. So perhaps just to conclude, perhaps each of you could say a little bit about what sort of skills requirements you think will be necessary to work with the platform technology.
So I'll have a go at this one. On the digital side, you might have seen when we launched our seismic design configurator last year, we beta tested it on initially my 8-year-old son, and then a bunch of 9-year-olds in a primary school in Hackney. So on the digital side, I don't think we've got a problem. I think there's a whole generation of Minecraft players on the way who just get this stuff, so not a problem. On the delivery side, we've built bits of Heathrow Airport using unemployed people from Crawley Job Centre. We've built pharmaceutical facilities using ex-Gurkhas. We're building bits of public sector using prisoners. So again, we're not, rather than trying to reskill existing trades, they've got enough to do, and that, everyone knows the sort of numbers are dwindling. So we're looking at how do you use exactly those IKEA principles to engage a whole lot of people who might not have considered construction, but if you can build a wardrobe, it turns out you can build a hospital. It's that sort of technology. Yeah,
with ours, it's very, very similar. Completely agree with Jamie there. It's we trained 6 locals from a shanty town in Namibia that couldn't use a drill properly, and they were able to erect a 63 square meter 2-bedroom unit in less than 3 hours. What we're doing is effectively, I think what Jamie's saying is it's the kit of parts, it's the plug and play. We engineer, we pre-engineer, we pre-design all of the components of performance into the assets, and then it's using these kinds of software platforms that we're also looking at with the training school, with BRE Academy, is that how do we then go one step further and make this free to access online? So in terms of what this provides, this is going to be a far, far simpler approach because of the kit parts approach, because of the digital requirement. The digital learning curve is a far simpler one than the complex of the current trade curve. And I think that's going to be the real impact point. Is you're going to be able to scale a lot faster, train a lot more people a lot more quickly using these digital technologies.
Yep.
Joe, did you want to speak on skills?
Yeah. As far as skills, utilizing Procore as a digital platform, especially for end users, our goal of our engineers is to not necessarily need training on any one specific tool. If you look at any kind of consumer apps, no one trains you on how to use Amazon on your phone or trains you how to use Facebook. Kind of the same idea for Procore. And we found with a lot of contractors, they didn't really need to give training on how to create an RFI in Procore. They needed to give some more training on how to ask an RFI question. So their older, more experienced personnel actually were picking it up quicker than the younger folks, just because they took all their construction knowledge and put it in an easy to use place.
That's great. Thanks very much, Joe. We are pretty much out of time, so thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Thank you to our three speakers, Jamie, Joseph and Joe, and thank you to our partner today, Procore Technologies. If I can just tell you about a couple of other upcoming webinars on Construction Manager. We've got risk management on 18th of June, again with Procore, and data on 30th of July, that's also with Procore. And you can find out about all of our digital events on our website, constructionmanagermagazine.com. That's all. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.